Thank you for the introduction, Tom. And thank you everyone for joining us today at AxeCon. We're thrilled to have you here. Our agenda today promises to be an exhilarating ride, pun intended, as we delve into the world of Peloton, the fitness tech company where Emma and I work. We'll first introduce ourselves and give you an overview of user research at Peloton. Next, I'll tease how we went from 0 to 1 developing the Peloton Row and its hero feature. Emma will then share the key accessibility considerations that guided our research, creation, data collection, and analysis. Then we kindly request that you hold your questions until the end, and thank you for being here. Okay, we'll introduce ourselves first. Go ahead, Emma.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrea. Hi, everyone. My name is Emma. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a user researcher at Peloton. I'm a woman in her mid-20s with blonde hair, and I'm wearing a pink sweater today. So just some context on myself. I joined Peloton about 3 years ago, originally as a research coordinator, so handling all the participant logistics, scheduling, recruiting for all of our researchers. But since then, I've switched over to the researcher track, and now I'm the lead researcher on Row software, but also have a hand in bike and tread research as well. Additionally, I partner with Andrea on accessibility research, so we'll be chatting about one of those initiatives in more detail today. And then a little bit more background is I have my bachelor's degree in psychology and sociology from Bowdoin College, a small liberal arts college in Maine. I have a passion for building healthier communities through technology. So my previous work experiences are in the telemedicine industry, but very happy to be at Peloton now where I'm able to focus more on that goal, but in the fitness space. And then in my free time, I love all things outdoor. I'm a New England girl through and through. So I love hiking, camping, and exploring the coast of Maine with my family. And here on my slide, I have 4 photos. So on the right, there's a photo of my sister and me boating around the coast of Maine. Couple photos of me hiking and kayaking, and then a photo of my golden doodle Mason, who's always along for the adventures.
Okay, this is Andrea speaking again. And hi, I'm Andrea. My pronouns are she, her. I am a white woman in her early 30s. I have an olive complexion and recently found out that I'm actually a true summer if you follow color analysis. And I'm wearing a grayish blue sweater today. I completed my bachelor's at Penn State University and my master's at Temple University in Philadelphia. And my claim to fame is that I was hired as Peloton's first UX researcher. And I'm really proud to say I've seen this team blossom over the last 5 years. Fun fact about me is I have a goal to attend each of the tennis Grand Slams. And I go to the US Open every year here in New York, and I've attended Wimbledon and have plans to check off the French Open this year. And so last up will be the Australian Open. And on the slide, there is a picture of me at Peloton's headquarters before I hosted a member empathy panel where we bring in Peloton members to discuss a variety of topics in front of a live audience, a la Watch What Happens Live, if you are a Bravo or Andy Cohen fan. Okay, so about Peloton and about our team. So Peloton is a tech company that produces and sells exercise equipment along with a subscription-based fitness platform. On the screen, there are 5 photos showcasing Peloton's 5 main product lines. There's the Peloton Row, which we will discuss in detail today. The Peloton Tread, the treadmill, the Peloton Bike, which I hope needs no introduction, the Peloton app, which users can access classes anywhere on their phones, tablets, computers, or even televisions. And shameless plug, you do not need Peloton equipment to access the app. And then finally, there's the Peloton Guide, which is an AI-powered device that uses camera to track movements and provide feedback on your form during strength training workouts. So a little bit more about Peloton. Peloton empowers people to be the best versions of themselves. This anyone, anywhere mindset is woven into the company culture and bleeds into product development lifecycle. And Peloton's community is much more than just a group of people using the same fitness equipment. It's a vibrant, supportive, and motivating network that extends beyond the handlebars and treadmills. The Peloton community is a powerful force that can help members stay motivated, accountable, and supported on their fitness journey. And there's a place for everyone in this welcoming and inclusive group. Which brings me to accessibility at Peloton. So accessibility and inclusivity are integrated into the product development process. We doubled down on accessibility in 2020, where we had a dedicated accessibility team. I'm forever grateful to the Catalyst team that created accessibility processes that much of the product team follows today. We strive to go above and beyond WCAG standards and deliver an excellent member experience regardless of who you are. I will admit, we're not perfect when it comes to accessibility, but as Emma Lovewell, the instructor, likes to say, progress, not perfection. And on the screen, there are some of the key accessibility features offered by Peloton. There's a photo of Peloton instructor Logan Aldridge, who specializes in adaptive content. We also have screen readers on Peloton bikes, treads, and rows. All have built-in support of TalkBack, so users can take classes and the content is read out loud. Closed captions. All on-demand and live classes have closed captions, which can be helpful for members who are deaf or hard of hearing. And then adjustable resistance and incline. Peloton bikes and treads all have these, so they can be adapted for different fitness abilities. A little bit about our team. The UX research team sits alongside our data science team within the product strategy organization. And we like to think of ourselves as thought partners and data generators for our product management team. I also want to draw attention to the fact that we use the word members instead of users on our team, because it creates this holistic view of a human being on the other side of our products. And the UX research team is one of the main advocates for accessibility and inclusivity, since we are the direct link between members and product. And there's a photo on the slide of Emma and myself with our fellow researchers and data scientists at Peloton headquarters in New York City. Okay, so let's talk about the newest addition to Peloton's product line, which is Peloton Row. The Peloton Row was designed to make the complex rowing sequence as easy as riding a bike. That's my last pun, I promise. I'm done after that. So those new to exercise and Olympic rowers would all have the same experience. For anyone who has ever rowed before, it's a complicated set of directions working 86% of the muscles in the body. I'm also debunking that rowing is an upper body exercise. The overall development of the Peloton Row took about 5 years or more from concept to market, and it involved countless cross-functional collaboration between researchers, product design, software, hardware, content, marketing, industrial design, mechanical engineering, and so many incredible teammates that I'm sure I'm forgetting. Also, during the development, I found myself walking around and chanting, catch, drive, finish, recover, even when I wasn't rowing. And then on the screen, there is an overhead view of a man rowing, and he is focused on the Peloton tablet during the catch. And there is also a second profile photo of a woman on the row as she is at the finish, and it's shown from the side. During the end-to-end development of the row, we learned that form anxiety is a real issue across athletes, regardless if they are beginner, novice, or advanced. We heard this numerous times during the discovery portion of our research. Rowers want to know, am I doing this right? Thus, Form Assist was born to alleviate said form anxiety. And Form Assist is a feature that uses sensors and softwares to analyze rowing form feedback in real time. It aims to help rowers improve their technique, maximize their efforts, and hopefully prevent any injuries. Form Assist works by identifying and corrects common form mistakes, such as rounding your back, not pushing fully with your legs, or rushing at the catch. For sighted members, this feature has a figurine that lights up red on the compromised body part and a text directive on how to correct the error. There's a screen grab showcasing how Form Assist looks when activated. For non-sighted members, TalkBack states the error occurring and reads the text directive on how to correct the error. There's limitations to Form Assist. The accuracy depends on the calibration process. So if Form Assist is not calibrated right, won't receive the same feedback, so it feels very chicken or the egg. While Form Assist is a valuable tool, it's not a replacement for a professional coach either. The current Form Assist technology relies on sensors within the row and doesn't use cameras, so it may not be able to detect all aspects of form. So when we were developing Form Assist, it went through an endless number of iterations with multiple designers, researchers, and product managers. During the development, the research team developed this framework for grading each set of the criteria. So on the screen, there are 5 circles and a linear Venn diagram showcasing how each step of the framework impacts the sequential elements. And I'll go through each of the elements now within the framework. So first, there is utility. Simply, does the member care about this while rowing? And quickly learn that yes, this is pretty important while rowing. Next is comprehension. For sighted members, when they see red on the body part, do they understand that something is wrong? Similarly, for non-sighted members, when Form Assist TalkBack speaks, do they understand why the audible cue was triggered? Next is sensory load. There is a high cognitive load during the act of rowing, compounded with an instructor coaching you, various metrics on the screen, either being seen or announced. So is the addition of Form Assist too much to absorb in the moment? Next, interpretation. Do members understand the error, especially non-sighted members, when they cannot see the body part that is being compromised in the visual? Form Assist relies on directives. Since the brain handles positive and negative information in different hemispheres, and I won't go into all that because frankly, I don't remember all of that, but negative information involves more thinking. And information that's processed through, and information that's said in the positive is much easier to interpret. So example would be, don't bend your knees at the drive versus straighten your knees at the drive is so much easier to interpret on the go. And finally, action. Do members have the information they need to properly change? And do they know if they're changing in a correct format? So this is also compounded when someone is new to rowing and the burden is much higher on those who are learning to row, since they're still developing muscle memory and learning how to row correctly. So we were particularly interested in sensory load, interpretation, and action when testing Form Assist throughout its iterations, including TalkBack. And those key elements are highlighted on the screen. We also wanted to maintain the standard of blind and low vision. Members should have the same experience as their sighted counterparts with this framework. which brings us to the Row Talkback research study. When Row was launched to the public, it was available with the out-of-box talkback experience. The goal was to iterate and enhance the talkback experience, particularly in class with Form Assist. And again, ultimately users who rely on assistive technology, such as talkback, should be able to exercise safely and independently. Next, Emma will go into detail on the ins and outs of this study with tips and words of advice on accessibility research, regardless of if you are in the fitness industry.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. I'm going to share my screen now, and then I'll go through some key considerations. Okay, awesome. So now, as I mentioned, I'm going to go through some key considerations when running in-person research with individuals who identify as blind or have low vision. Now, as we go through these key considerations, I'm going to sprinkle in some tidbits of what worked well for us when we ran that Row Talkback study that Andrea just presented. And then I also want to just preface this by saying that this was personally my very first time leading accessibility research. So there's definitely a lot that I learned along the way. So as we go through these learnings, I hope you can walk away with some tips and tricks to incorporate at your own organizations. So we broke this up into 3 main pillars of research. So we have recruitment, research planning, and data collection. So we'll first start with recruitment. So this means identifying prospective participants, conducting outreach, screening them for eligibility, obtaining informed consent, and incentivizing them for their time and travel to and from the testing location. So first, how do you find prospective participants? You're going to want to think about your target demographic. So for us, we are thinking about wanting individuals who identify as blind as low vision, as we mentioned. The reason for this is because we know that vision is a spectrum with varying needs at varying different levels, and we wanted those needs represented in our research. Additionally, we thought about rowing experience. So we wanted people who had at least some experience rowing. We know that rowing, there is a learning curve. And because we weren't testing this on the tread, where running and walking is a more natural human movement, we really wanted to make sure that they had at least some experience rowing, whether that was on a rowing machine or on the water. So then we could focus our feedback more on talkback. Additionally, we thought about the testing location. So we knew we wanted to conduct usability testing. There are a couple ways to go about this. One was shipping out our rowing machines to people and to wherever they are located in their homes. But we know that this can take time and it can be costly. So what we ended up doing is we had people come on site to our New York headquarters where Peloton is located, and they would come to our research lab and get on the Peloton row in person there and provide feedback. I do want to call out, though, that if you are located in a more rural location or a smaller city, you might want to consider traveling to a more populous area, especially if your recruitment criteria is pretty niche. And then one other main consideration here that I do want to call out is that you can also consider leveraging accessibility experts for recruitment support. And that's what we ended up doing for Row. So we partnered with a nonprofit organization who had a whole panel of individuals who meet our eligibility criteria, who are located in the New York area and willing and able to come in person for research. So a quick shout out to DQ, because Glenda at DQ happened to be at our New York headquarters when we were trying to figure out the recruitment for the study. And she connected us with this nonprofit who was just incredible and really helped with all aspects of the recruitment. Now, what's the best way to communicate with people? So typically at Peloton, when we are conducting outreach, we do so over email. But for accessibility research like this, it's important to take into consideration that people might have varying degrees of experience level with different screen readers. So you're definitely going to want to capture their preferences in your initial screener. So they might prefer to communicate over email and be great with that, or they might prefer over the phone. So just be ready to adapt to whatever their needs may be. Now, how do you determine eligibility in an accessible way? So first and foremost, the screener platform itself must be accessible. This means that it must be user-friendly and compatible with different screen readers like JAWS, Google VoiceOver, or Android TalkBack. And you're also going to want to be respectful when phrasing questions and knowing the right questions to ask. The reason for this is because disability can be a sensitive topic, so just be mindful of that when you're drafting your screener. You can always lean on advice and resources that are out there, especially from accessibility experts, and a lot of that can be found online. And so what we did for our Row Talkback study is we leveraged Google Forms, so highly recommend that if you're looking for an accessible screener. We also use DQ's resources on survey questions. So for instance, if someone selects that they identify as blind versus low vision, you might ask different follow-up questions. But one of the questions that we wanted to ask regardless was their experience level with different screen readers. The reason for this is because our study was on Android TalkBack within the Peloton Row. So we wanted to know their experience with TalkBack or other screen readers on the scale of beginner, intermediate, advanced, expert. And this was really important knowledge to have when participants came in for their sessions and for data analysis as well. And how do you ensure that participants understand their rights and the risks of the study? So your legal documents, including informed consent, which is always important to capture before any study, are accessible. So again, you're going to want to make sure that these are screen reader compatible. Also provide options for them to sign and review in person or in advance if they are comfortable with screen readers. But I do want to say that if you do plan on collecting hard copy signatures, you're going to want to review your state's notary laws because participants can't necessarily see what they're signing. It might be paramount that you have a notary witness on site to make sure that they're signing the appropriate paperwork. And now, how do you incentivize and reimburse travel for in-person research? So first, I would recommend understanding people's preferences for gift cards. So this can be the travel company, Uber, Lyft, or other. You're going to want to be mindful of Uber and Lyft ADA violations in the past and potential lived experiences that participants might have with Uber, Lyft, or another travel agency. And also collect their preferred gift card format. So if they prefer an e-gift card or a hard copy gift card, give them that option. And if they do prefer hard copy, do what we did with Peloton Row's Talkback study, which is just planning in advance with that and making sure that you order the hard copy gift cards to your testing location well in advance of the interview sessions. Okay, now we're going to switch gears and get into research planning. So when you get on an accessibility research study, you might be very excited and eager to start putting pen to paper, drafting your research protocol. But I would encourage you to take a step back and make sure that you have a baseline understanding and awareness of disabilities. So do you know the differences between different disabilities? If you're leading a study on vision impairment, do you understand the difference between blind and low vision? And also, do you understand their day-to-day challenges that they might face, including with your own products? So how can we build awareness and empathy for those who have a visual impairment? First, educate yourself. There are a lot of great resources out there, a lot of great articles, books, YouTube videos. If you want to watch videos on how to navigate screen readers, highly recommend those. But more than anything, I think really expanding your circle is the most helpful. So once you start engaging in conversation with those who have a visual impairment, you'll get to hear their personal stories and you'll be reminded that we are all human at the end of the day. I know for this talkback study, as I mentioned, it was the first accessibility study that I had ever led before. So I was very nervous. I didn't want to say or do the wrong thing. So what really helped ease those nerves, we did a few things. So we partnered with DQ to host an accessibility research summit at our New York headquarters, and that covered a variety of different topics. So we talked about accessibility awareness, recruitment and interviewing tips, and then we got hands-on screen reader practice. But what was most helpful for me was meeting Patrick, who's a consultant at DQ who has a visual impairment, and he gave us a lot of great advice. And I think the best thing for me was getting to lead a mock interview with Patrick. So I got to ask him questions as if he were a participant, and he just really reiterated that it's okay to mess up and we're not all going to be perfect, but as long as you're trying, it shows you care, and that goes a really long way. Now, how do we adapt our research protocol for participants who have a visual impairment? When I was starting to think about planning for this research, I thought I was going to have to carve out a lot more time to totally revamp my typical research protocol. But that actually wasn't the case, and there were a lot more similarities than there were differences. But there were some differences that I do want to call out. So one, think through your timeline. So checking in and escorting participants for in-person research can take a bit more time than usual. So I recommend buffering more time in between sessions and within sessions to accommodate that. I'd also recommend being descriptive in the script and avoiding visual cues. So an example of this is typically when we have people come on site for in-person research at Peloton into our lab, we have a whole camera and microphone set up. And that is, if they consent to recording and live streaming to our stakeholders, we'll just point that out, like, here's our audio and visual setup, yada, yada. But instead of using a visual cue like here, I went back and revised that language to say, directly to your right, there's a camera and a microphone pointed in your direction to capture feedback. So go through your script and try to avoid those visual cues and just be descriptive where you can. And then lastly, give your participants an opportunity to familiarize themselves with the product. So for row talkback, we had our participants, we buffered 5 minutes at the beginning of sessions to go on over to the Peloton row. Our participants got to feel around, they got to touch the seat, moving up and down the rail. They got to get a feel of where the handlebars are and the size of the tablet and the shape and all of that. So I highly recommend giving them that time to feel around your product and get familiar with it. And this is also a good safety precaution. Now, how can we build confidence moderating interviews on assistive technology that maybe we've never used before? So there's no time like the present. You can always practice on your own products. You can always pull out your phone or devices. So for us, we are lucky to have a lot of Peloton rows at the office. So I would go up to our gym, or I would go into the lab, and I would turn on Form Assist and try to navigate using, I would turn on TalkBack, try to navigate using TalkBack, and also understand what that in-class experience is like with TalkBack. And I think what's key here is just repetition. And the more repetition you get with whatever it is that you're testing, the more confident you'll be when it comes to moderating those interviews. So for me, just doing 5 to 15 minutes every day in those 2 weeks leading up to interviews helped me with that confidence, but it also allowed me to refine my research questions in that protocol. So for instance, Form Assist, I assumed would automatically be queued in class with TalkBack, but that actually wasn't the case, and participants would need to feel around on the tablet with their finger, find Form Assist, and then double tap to activate it. And so after learning that on my own, I decided to go back to the research plan and add in a question, which was, can you show me how you would turn on Form Assist cues, to see if they could do so with ease or with difficulty. How can we get stakeholders engaged and excited about the study? So the cool thing about accessibility research is that you might have even more people involved in wanting to take part in this initiative. So for us, we had beyond our PMs, our engineers, designers, analytics partners, we had ESG, so environmental social governance, and our legals team taking part as well. And because there are so many partners, it was really important to align on the purpose and research goals in that initial kickoff meeting. And I would encourage you all to encourage your stakeholders to view this type of research as an opportunity and not a challenge. And one way that you can do this is to frame it like, if you're designing and building products for those with a disability, you're designing and building products that will benefit everyone. And a prime example of this is with Form Assist calibration. So Andrea talked about it a little bit earlier, but in order to get accurate personalized form feedback, you have to calibrate Form Assist first. And so we had our participants go through that calibration process, and by the end, there was no confirmation as to whether or not they did it correctly. And that was feedback that we got for them. Like they would have liked to hear a chime or hear some words that they calibrated correctly or not, and to redo it. And that's feedback that we hear from other sighted members as well. So an update to the calibration process like that would really benefit all members. I would also just say go into it with a lot of excitement, and excitement is infectious. So get everyone really on board and also create opportunities to collaborate and build empathy together as a team. So for our Row Talkback study, we invited our stakeholders to take part in that Accessibility Research Summit. They were also heavily involved in drafting the research protocol and providing feedback. And we invited them to observe our interview sessions remotely so they could really see that human feedback and get to sit in real time and be a part of it. Awesome. Okay, now lastly, we'll talk about data collection, which also will hit on some data analysis as well. So first, how do we ensure an accessible testing location? So the testing room and building must be safe and easy for participants to navigate. Some things you might want to think about is, if they have a guide dog, is there a place for the guide dog to sit down during the session? Or if they have a walking cane, is there a place for them to put it that's easily accessible in case they need to get it out again in order to walk over to the product or around the room? I would recommend cleaning the space and removing any safety hazards, so loose cords, unnecessary furniture. And I would also say lean on your teammates for support on testing days. So we're very grateful at Peloton to have amazing research coordinators who really help, especially with on-site research. So we had our research coordinator escorting our participants to and from the testing room on all of the testing days. And this was really great because then we could focus more on the interview sessions themselves. So I would highly recommend leading into the team mentality and not being afraid to ask for help, because it's definitely all hands on deck to make this research happen. And how can we provide a warm welcome when participants come on site for their interview? So regardless of disability, all participants should have a very positive experience when they participate in research. So always provide a safe and comfortable environment, demonstrate proper etiquette, and you can lead with compassion and kindness as you would with anyone. So what we did for Row, and here are some tips that we got from DQ, but you can identify yourself, speak directly to the person. They can tell if you're looking to the side or looking down, so always speak directly to the person. You can offer your arm for guidance, but respect if they say no. And then there's some more tips here that you can always reflect back on too. But I do want to call out that you never know what someone goes through in the hours, minutes, days, seconds leading up to those interview sessions. So for example, we had one participant who was trying to navigate the streets of New York, and it was hectic, and she arrived a bit frazzled, which is totally understandable. I have 20/20 vision, but I still struggle to get around the city. But when she arrived a little frazzled to the New York headquarters, it's our job as researchers and coordinators to calm their nerves and just get them ready for the research, get them in a good mindset. And you can do that by just being super warm and kind, again, as you would with anyone. And then finally, how do we measure the accessibility of a product? So there are many ways you can do this. You can collect qualitative, quantitative, and observational data. And that's what we did in this study. So to give you an example, for Form Assist, we collected that feedback all those ways. So observationally, if Form Assist cued that they were overextending at the catch, did we see them make the proper changes in their form to reduce that error? Quantitatively, we asked them to rate a statement on a scale from 1, I strongly disagree, to 5, I strongly agree. And the statement, for example, was, during class, I understood how to improve my form. And then finally, we also started with a qualitative question. So open-ended, like during class, how was your experience with Form Assist? To see if they would naturally bring this up. And then finally, we wanted a holistic, overarching measurement of row accessibility. So what we ended up doing is we leveraged and adapted the accessibility usability scale by Fable. The scale has a set of 10 questions where participants rate 10 statements on a scale of 1 is strongly disagree to 5 is strongly agree. An example of 2 of those statements are, I found the row unnecessarily complex, or I found the row easy to use. And after doing some computing and averaging, we found an AUS score for the Peloton row. So on this slide, there's a bar chart, and you can see that row talkback, the bar on the right, scored a 67, and that is 11 points higher than the bar to the left, which is the average for screen readers. So our main interpretation from this is that we're doing quite well, and the row is a very accessible product in general, and especially in the fitness space with fitness equipment. But there's always work to be done, and there are always ways that we can make our products even more accessible. And so we can come back to this AUS score and see how we do as we go through future iterations in hopes of making our products more accessible to all. Now I'm going to leave you with some key takeaways. So first, it's okay not to have all the answers. You can lean on experts like DQ and nonprofit organizations for support, and also people at your own company who may have experience leading accessibility research in the past. Start by building awareness and empathy. Educate yourself and find ways to get involved in the community and interact with those who have a visual impairment. Create a safe space and be mindful of lived experiences. Always ensure an accessible testing location and demonstrate proper etiquette by providing a warm welcome when people come on site for research. And then become an expert in whatever it is that you're testing. So practice with that assistive technology to become an informed ally and gain that confidence to go through the rest of the study and moderate those interviews. And finally, be an advocate at your organization. Champion inclusive products and spearhead accessibility research initiatives to make your products and the world more accessible to everyone. And I just want to conclude by saying thank you to everyone who has tuned in this morning. Major thank you for joining us today. And then also thank you to everyone at Peloton who participated in this research in one way or another. And also thank you to DQ for your support during the study, and also the nonprofit organization we partnered with. So many thanks all around, and I'll hand this back over to our moderator and we'll get into some Q&A.
Thank you, and great job to you both, Emma and Andrea. We've got a lot of good engagement and questions in the chat. Let's go to our first, which is, are sighted members able to hear the talkback instructions as well? It's an important need for those with neurodivergence and other cognitive needs.
At the moment, if you turn on TalkBack, it is available. But that's something we tend to see in a lot of our research is we build something specifically for a blind member, low vision, deaf, any disability, and it turns out being an enhanced experience for someone without that disability. So good question, and good, that's a great question.
Specifically addressed to Andrea. Andrea, as you think back to accessibility work you've done on Peloton Bike, Tread, and Row, which platform had the most accessibility challenges for your research and solutioning, and why?
I would have to say the bike, because that is where we started with accessibility research, was on the bike. So there were a ton of unknowns going into research and going into specifically talkback. And we also found that a large portion of our user base are Apple users. So overcoming talkback as a Google product was also a bump that we didn't see coming. So yeah, I would say bike, and then from there got a little bit easier with each product line.
Thank you. How did you make sure your own biases and stereotypes as a researcher may not affect the research study?
It's a very meta question, I would say. as, as researchers in general, the guidance is always leave your biases at the door as best as you can. So just going into every study with a clean slate, but also understanding who your user is. It's sort of a conflicting answer, but would you add anything, Emma?
Yeah, I would also just add like a small tip that I learned after every interview that we led. I would just scribble like my main takeaways of words that they use during the session, or just like concrete things that occurred during the session. And then so that's a good way to like always go back and make sure that there's realness behind my findings in the end after I do some analysis.
Yeah, and you made me think of something else of whenever there's an observational portion to the study, you have those checklists already written out, and it's really a yes or no answer of were they able to complete this? Yes or no, maybe a tiny bit of gray area, but having those standardizations across the study is another way to keep your biases in check.
Gotcha, thanks. As you've worked on Row, were you anxious about hitting an accessibility need that you might not be able to meet, or that would conflict with other usability needs? How would you recommend overcoming this type of worry?
I think in general, for any research study, you go into it with goals and objectives and come out with a lot of miscellaneous data points that you didn't expect. So I don't know if it's ever worried. It's more of a standard at this point of something is always going to be unexpected. I hope I answered that correctly.
If not, they'll post a reformed version of the question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you add anything to that, Emma?
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Can you talk more about the recruitment effort and the methods you use to engage members?
Yeah, so for this study, I didn't get into too much detail. So we partnered with a nonprofit organization, and they handled all aspects of the recruitment. So they had their panel of individuals that they reached out to themselves, and they did all of the scheduling, the follow-ups, the incentives. So we were pretty hands-off with that, actually. But what we did is we shared kind of like expectations of duration, what they'll need to come in prepared for, like exercising for 20 minutes. So we gave all that information to the third-party partner, and they relayed that when they drafted the outreach email. But previously, Andrea and I both did a little bit. I was the coordinator at the time for Tread Talkback, and for Tread Talkback, we ourselves did the recruitment. So I would draft up that email and send that out to individuals over email. And if anyone wrote in the screener that they would like to be contacted over the phone, I would follow up over phone.
Anything, Emma, you want to add in terms of like criteria that was used for recruitment?
Yeah, so in terms of criteria, so vision, we know it's a spectrum, so we captured people's vision, rowing experience, and also exercise experience in general. So because we work at Peloton and they're getting on an exercise machine, it's really important that they can sustain exercise for 15 to 20 minutes. So we made sure of that. And then as with any research, we want a very diverse group. So we captured some demographics just to make sure that we had people of different ages, different genders, all of that, as you would with other research as well.
Thank you. Another question. Did you research for other vision hurdles like color contrast or text size, etc., in addition to blindness?
That's a good question. The focus of Talkback was on Talkback. But we also have really incredible UX designers who have color contrast, magnification within their checklist as they're designing. So when I first started the presentation talking about it's really all hands on deck of having the full product team on board for accessibility, we also have designers who automatically are building that into their designs. So it was less of an unknown for us of would someone be able to look at this color contrast or is the text large enough? So the bulk of what we studied, because we had the most unknowns, were with talkback.
Gotcha. Did you run a pilot test of this usability test, and who did you test with?
Yes, this is a great question. So we did pilots. What was really great, so I mentioned Patrick, who's a consultant at DQ. He didn't end up piloting for this one, but he offered. And so I think that's also another great perk if you do work with accessibility experts, is you might get someone who is like so willing and able to even be a pilot participant for you, which is just so kind. But I do want to give another tip. So we didn't have Patrick come in, but we did work with our nonprofit organization and we asked them, is there someone in your panel that is like really, really kind and friendly and would give good feedback and like be okay if it's a little bit rocky the first time. And so our nonprofit organization did schedule someone really just like happy to be there for research, and it's okay if it doesn't go perfectly. So that's also a good tip too, if you're like wanting to get your nerves out with that first session.
Also, when we were developing talkback on tread, there were more points of anxiety because getting someone on a treadmill just inherently is a little makes my stomach drop sometimes of, are we putting them in danger at high speeds? Will they be able to do it? So we did pilot that study again with DQ a couple of times until we felt like we were in a good place to collect data from participants. Yes. I think in general, our team does a lot of pilots, so.
With only a couple minutes left, it looks like we have time for a last question. There are several more, but both of our presenters said that they will make themselves available offline, and we do have a community Discord after this, so we can put those questions in there. This last question will be, have you considered, or are you already doing research for neurodiversity needs when using Peloton or exercising?
That is on our roadmap for researchers for inclusivity, especially. We're finding out tidbits along the way of there's a game on Peloton today. It's called Lane Break, where you match your resistance to musical cues, and it's very reminiscent of Mario Kart. And we're finding that neurodivergent users tend to gravitate towards this game. So we want to go into a little bit more detail of why that is and perhaps where else we can go with gaming and pairing that with people who are neurodivergent. Great question.
Great answers and great presentation overall. Thank you so much. This is a wonderful session. So thank you. Thank you to you. And then thank you to all who participated in the chat and the questions and answers and for watching.